I'm Barb Waalkes. I've been connected with Lee Street for over 40 years, and this is my husband.
I'm Bob Waalkes. I was born and raised at Lee Street, was baptized here. For those of you that remember Kenny Van Leeuwen, we were baptized on the same day. I don't quite remember it, but that's what I've been told. We've been married for almost 24 years.
I've always been involved in children's ministry at Lee Street. All my friends back in the day, we all taught Sunday school together. And we moved on to different Bible studies and such. But back in the 90s, I believe, when Pastor Jim Bohr was here, I helped him form a group called Pizza with the Pastor. And a few of my friends, we would meet here with at noon on Friday with the senior class of Godfrey Lee High School. They would come for pizza. So we would order dozen, 20 pizzas every Friday. And sometimes we had to cut them into slivers because we had so many kids downstairs. And Jim would always talk with them and give a message of some sort. And then we would just interact with them. And we did that for, I believe, 3 years. Could be different than that, but I think that's it. And we would do things on the weekend at night. We would have like a sleepover at church, or we would go to a restaurant, or we would do different things with the kids, and we bonded with them, and it was great until the high school closed campus for lunch, and the kids had to stay, and so we were no longer able to meet them. But occasionally we run into these kids who are now in their 40s, and it's just fun to see where they're at now.
I grew up at Lee Street. My parents and my 5 siblings, twice a Sunday back in those days. When I did cadets and Sunday school, all the stuff that all the kids did. In my early 20s, I kind of got away from coming to church and for almost 20 years. And then when I came back, started doing things like led a Bible study. I was an elder, was a member of the witness team, and on that team we had just started the bash around that time, and then I was involved with that for a lot of years. We started the Hallelujah Party, which still goes on. That was always a fun thing. So the bash, which stands for Believe and Salvation Happens, the acronym, it was a neighborhood party that we always did in August, kind of a back to school, but we provided food, and we still do, provided food, games, just to get to know the neighbors and to welcome them into our community here at Lee Street. The Hallelujah Party we did on Halloween night, and kind of the same thing, gathering for neighbors. And we would have s'mores, fires, donuts, cider, and so that's still happening. Somewhere in that time, I became involved with Lighthouse Ministries. I think I joined it probably the second year or so. Claire Dykstra and some other people had started it, and it was an after-school program that was mainly Godfrey Lee students. There were a few from Calvin Christian, from other schools, but we would meet on, we would meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays right after school, and longtime helpers were Ruth Wieringa, Russ and Betty Hahn, Arnie, and Noreen DeHogue, and Carol Tenhoff. We had a number of leaders, but our best leader was Andre Hudgens, and we would have games. We had a pool table, ping pong, other games, we would help the kids with homework sometimes, and we would always have a snack. But we would play games with them too, and that was always fun. Ron Huster was involved for a number of years also, and being a former teacher, he gave a different insight and was really good with the kids. Some of the things that happened at Lighthouse, the kids from the neighborhood grew up differently than I did. And, but we loved them, and I think they came to love us. Every summer we would take a group of them that had good behavior and good attendance to Michigan Adventure. And that was always a fun day. There were some parents that came along with their kids, and they were sometimes more difficult than the kids at Michigan Adventure, not sticking with their kids. But we had some good relationships there. We would play basketball and football outside. There's a couple instances. One was two twin boys that lived on our street after Barb and I got married. And they were troublemakers on our street. And it was almost like a gang they had at their house. Their parents were not there. One of them was in prison. I don't know where the other one was. So they're high school kids that have the run of the house. But they were always very respectful to me. They would walk down our street, and even though they had been causing a lot of problems on our street and we had called the police, they were always very respectful to me. There was one time that I asked one of them, Tim Palmer, I believe, he was helping clean up the parking lot at church. And I was just talking to him, and I said, so Tim, do you go to church somewhere? And he looked at me funny and he said, yeah, I go to church here. And what occurred to me is, yeah, he came here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I had in my head that you're not going to church because you're not here on Sundays. But he was probably here more than a lot of our members. So that really opened my eyes. There was another student called Stefan, and he had brain surgery when he was a member of Lighthouse. He was a little bit of a troublemaker too, but we visited him in the hospital. His mother was very appreciative, and so yeah, these kids grow up. But the one I saw probably 4 or 5 years ago at Speedway, I was getting gas, and a guy comes up to me, and it was Tim, and he and his brother had good jobs. They were doing well. A couple years ago, I got my oil changed at Bell Tire, and Stefan was working there. He came up to me. I did not recognize him, but he recognized me right away, came up, and we had a good talk. So I think that it had a good impact on kids. There's one other girl that came with her sister and cousins, and then she also came to church. I would pick them up on Sunday mornings, and Brenda is now married, and her kids go to the Potter's house. She's involved with her church. So definitely some good stories there.
I've seen a lot of changes in Lee Street over the 40 years that I've been here. I raised my 5 kids here. We don't have as many families as we once had, so the sanctuary isn't quite as full on Sundays as it used to be. But you can't come here one day in the week and find it empty. It's full of kids every afternoon. It's full of people doing things in the morning, doing ministry or having Bible studies or prayer. So the picture of Lee Street Church looks a little different, but I think its effectiveness is probably stronger than it ever has been in the average person's life. So I'm very proud to be a member and to serve in the ministries that I do.
Yeah, I would second that. And I love the New City Kids is here. It reminds me of Lighthouse, in that we are ministering to kids. And I've talked to a couple different parents of kids in the neighborhood. We live in the neighborhood and we look for a house here. We actually asked someone, Henry Velzen, if he would sell his house because we like the looks of it and we want to move into the neighborhood to do ministry here. I wish that there were more people in the neighborhood that we could get to join our church or even to move in the neighborhood. I think that would be very beneficial. I know Dan Howard has said that he's probably going to sell his condo and he's going to get a place on top of Waalkes liquor store. So he'll be moving in shortly, which I really appreciate.